From News Channel 9, your local election headquarters, this is the Onondaga County Executive Debate. Incumbent Republican Ryan McMahon and Democrat Tony Malavenda. Here now is your moderator, News Channel 9's Dan Cummings.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to our debate now for Onondaga County Executive. Dan Cummings here. It's good to see you. If you haven't voted yet, and of course you have had the chance for the first time ever to vote, you will on Tuesday, and you've got a big decision to make. So let's begin our questioning right away. First question, because of a draw before our broadcast, we'll go to Democrat Tony Malavenda. And I want to start, gentlemen, by talking about the paid part of your campaigns for this office. Mr. Malavenda, you've had a very successful career as a businessman, and therefore the ability to bankroll almost your entire campaign to the tune of $1 million or more out of your own pocket. Why did you choose to spend most of that money on attack ads?
I didn't spend most of my money on attack ads. I spent my money on truthful ads. Ads have a message. So a message can be negative or it can be positive. The way I view an attack ad or a negative ad is an ad that doesn't say the truth. I vetted my commercials very carefully. I was very careful not to spin or twist the truth. And I believe, and frankly, most of my money went on very positive ads. But that's the nature of this, right? You can have a positive message, but if you're telling a lie or taking a half-truth and spinning it into a lie, that to me is a negative commercial. That's what doesn't do justice to the taxpayer or to the voter.
Mr. McMahon, your campaign also took a downward turn and went negative in a hurry and kind of stayed there right till the end.
Yeah, Dan, I think after 60 days of negative ads, we really had the chance to push back against some of the narrative that was being said and some of the lies that were being told about us. I think over the last week, I think both campaigns have done better. But I do want to remind the public that about 2 weeks ago, we were at Syracuse.com's debate. And that I had an ad that was tough on Mr. Malavenda's campaign up for the one day. And I offered to take the ad down if he would take his down, and he refused. So unfortunately, negative ads are part of the campaign process. I resent the fact that we had to be tough in our ads. But we offered to take them down, and our opponent didn't. And I think that really leads into really what this campaign has been. It's been a distraction about trying to distract the public about the progress we're making as a community because it fits my opponent's narrative, whereas the progress we're having in Onondaga County right now is undeniable. And certainly when we talk about our record and we talk about the progress, we win.
We're going to go back and forth on this, starting with you now, Mr. McMahon. If you agreed to take the ads down or offered to take them down, is that because they weren't entirely true? No,
it was a tone where the tone of the campaign had changed. And I spoke to Mr. Malavenda and said, I know where this tone is going. I believe that what you're saying is untruthful and a lie, because it was, and it's been fact-checked that it was. I was more than happy if he was uncomfortable with what we were saying to take down the ads. His campaign wasn't willing to do so, and that was well reported by Syracuse.com.
Yeah, we'll give them credit for that, the fact-checking that they did. Mr. Malavenda, first of all, Mr. McMahon, which particular lie are you talking about? The one that you challenged him on to take it down because it was a proven lie?
Well, look, we saw an escalation of negative attack ads from PG-rated ads to PG-13 and then X-rated ads. So certainly at the end, we weren't going to let someone accuse us of being involved in a crime when that was known to be false. And that's what my opponent's ads were alluding to. Mr.
Malavenda, your turn.
Yeah, so I couldn't possibly disagree more. When you have, if what we were doing was we were competing for a job to be center forward on a soccer team, and he put out an ad that said, you know, Mr. Malavenda is fat and old and slow. That's not an attack ad, because it's truth, right? And it goes straight to the job that you're trying to hit, that you're trying to get, I should say, right? My attack ads, as you call them, I don't call them attack ads. They never, ever accused Mr. McMahon of a crime. They accused him of incompetence on issues that mattered directly to the voter, and that the voter had a right to know, whether it was the pay raise that was done and the county controller sued the legislature while he was chair of the legislature. It did cost $500,000 in legal fees, as well as the legal fees on the controller's side, right? He was involved in raising investments that he received a fee for that cost several local residents lots of money. This wasn't just a Tupperware party that he held at his home. People lost tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, let's take these, since you brought the specifics up, Mr. McMahon, first of all, on the pay raise. It was done first illegally and then legally, right?
Well, look at Dan. The judge ruled that 8 out of 9 counts were done properly. He asked us to fix and put a notice up on a salary schedule. In the judge's ruling, he never used the word illegal. He asked us, he said that the county legislative branch of government for 50 years had been doing these wrong, and he asked us to fix it. There was no pay raise after that. We gave any money we had, we gave back to the taxpayer, and then we went forward and took a vote on it. And if Mr. Malavena wants to debate the merits of the vote, we had a female county executive, Joni Mahoney, who hadn't received a raise for 9 years, yet her male counterpart, Nick Pirro, received a cost of living increase every year. So it was a policy decision, certainly, that we believe the females county executives' work was just as important, if not more important, as the times got more complicated than Mr. Pirro's.
Now, on the other issue regarding the Tupperware party he referred to, where you were recruiting investors for this gentleman who previously had issues with the New York Stock Exchange.
Look, Mr. Malavena has been lying about me on this. He knows it's a lie. He's been proven it's a lie. There were no Tupperware parties. I introduced friends and family to CEOs of companies, and that's that.
Look, I said Tupperware party because he's made comments about I invited people to my home to look at this investment. The reality is,
that's a lie, Tony.
That's not a lie.
Tony, that's a lie.
Listen, what he did was he received a fee to raise these investments. In the court documents, it was a management fee, right? He did not do his homework. The person that he was dealing with was clearly a charlatan. It was easily found on BrokerCheck at the FINRA site, which anyone could have seen. This man commingled customer assets. He made trades without customer approval and then threatened customers, including their lives and their families, if they wouldn't file a claim.
Your point is Mr. McMahon should have known about that before he tried to.
If you look at my ad, it says with a couple of clicks he would have known he was dealing with a fraud. It didn't say Mr. McMahon was a fraud. It's pretty clear. Now, on the other hand, what I get at me is I get this. While being investigated and found guilty, right, for taking an illegal tax break. I've never taken an illegal tax break. I've never been investigated.
That ad refers to the Empire Zone credits that were given to Mr. Malavena's company.
Look, I didn't send the mail that Mr. Malavena is referring to, so outside parties.
Did you know about it?
Outside parties have sent a lot of different things, Dan, that weren't inaccurate. I certainly knew the New York State party was going to be involved in the race. So, look, here we are 8 minutes into this debate, and we're talking about nothing that is pertinent to regular families in Onondaga County.
And the reason I brought it up, gentlemen, off the top of this debate is because unless people are blind or not paying attention to their television screens or their mailboxes at all, or if some of us have tried to not pay attention, it's all been negative for the past several weeks. 90% of it's been negative. So I'm giving you a chance to kind of explore with each other the depth of the negativity and why it had to go that way. Your turn, Mr. Malavena.
Well, look, again, you know, the issues that I saw, both of us have a political narrative, right? His narrative is don't say anything about your opponent because you draw someone who 2 months ago was unknown to the public. You draw attention to him. He has a political narrative. My job is to say, why is he not fit for office? That's the position that I'm in. And if I felt he was, I wouldn't be running this race. And the issues that I raised were pertinent. Some of the people he raised that money from, right, were vendors who worked for the county. Vendors who now work in a law firm that a year ago raised, what, like $90,000 for him overnight.
Well, let's start with some specifics there.
These are not
on issues that
little
matter,
things.
that should matter. How about things that should matter to the public? You have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to pay for your campaign, Mr. McMahon, much of it from law firms and developers and engineers who in fact have done and still do business with Onondaga County. If that isn't pay to play, what would you call it?
Look, at donors, whether you're an individual and live in a neighborhood or you're a company, donate because they support our administration's agenda, not because I support theirs. Bottom line.
And Mr. Malavenda, years ago when your company, a very successful company, agreed to take $3 million in Empire Zone tax credits, and now you're criticizing your opponent in negative ads for giving Destiny USA and anybody else who came, that's not right now. Why was it right for your company back then and it isn't right anymore?
It's a completely different type of tax credit, okay? What I'm talking about are people who are paying to play in Onondaga County government funding his campaign. People who are getting pilots and sales tax breaks and mortgage tax breaks, right, from OSIDA, which was the board of OSIDA, the Onondaga County Industrial Development Association, is appointed by the chair of the legislature, which was Mr. McMahon, right? My tax break was a statewide program marketed to every business in the state. That was marketed by every law firm and every accounting firm in the state. So me taking that tax break was literally checking a box. It'd be like someone at home joining the STAR program for their
But if it was okay for you to check that box and take that break for supposedly creating jobs, why isn't it proper now for the county or the state to give tax breaks to other developers and business people?
I don't believe that tax breaks are the most effective way towards economic development.
But
I'm not saying you would take that tool away. What I'm saying is that what I did with my tax break, right, that was, first of all, that money was over 14 years. It was not only legal, but we were the ideal company. We during those 14 years, we more than doubled our employment. We brought 98% of our revenue came from out of state into New York State. That's exactly what the state had intended in that tax break, right? But we did change our structure, which caused one of our companies to be eliminated from the program, but that was because the rules changed. There was nothing illegal there.
Let me just look at Dan. On this notion, the New York State Department of Labor called Mr. Malavenda's company a shirt changer, and that they were not entitled to some of the breaks they did. Whatever reason they postured, they did. So Mr. Malavenda does not hold the moral authority to question anybody on tax breaks. Now the OSIDA board actually it has uniform tax exempt policy so that there is no gray areas or whatnot. If you invest X and create Y, you're entitled to this type of benefit. That's what the OSIDA board looks at, and the OSIDA board works and comes up with these policies. So the whole issue of tax breaks is one that I don't think my opponent has a lot of credibility on.
Well,
so I have to respond
quickly,
because that's not what New York State said. They adjusted the rules, and we always played by the rules. Always. We always paid our taxes.
once they
I do have
Once they adjusted the rules, your company no longer got
one
that.
of my companies, but the other company remained.
Okay, let me,
let me say this about OSIDA.
Yeah.
OSIDA, I looked at their charter. So you can look at SIDA's charter and OSIDA's charter. The SIDA charter gives a set of tests that companies have to meet for these breaks and the levels at which they have to meet them. OSIDA's charter is written so broadly and so loosely that really the OSIDA board can do whatever it wants. It's open for abuse, and it has been abused.
quickly on your paid advertisement for these, is there anything that you would take back, Mr. McMahon, that you wish you hadn't either authorized or paid for yourself in terms of negative advertising against your opponent?
Look, I think it's always tough in these campaigns when both Tony and I have families, and so I understand every day. I have 3 young children, 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 3-year-old. What these campaigns, the toll it has on them. So certainly, I regret that Mr. Malavenda spent the time he did attacking me, and that we couldn't have a debate just on the issues the whole time. And I'm sure at the end of this process, Mr. Malavenda and I will have a cup of coffee sometime and probably agree on a lot of things.
Well, I'll ask him the same question. Would you take back any of what you've put out there in terms of negative advertising?
I wouldn't take back any of the ads that my team has put out. I will tell you that I vetted things thoroughly. We were going to do an internal mailer where we photoshopped a MAGA hat on Mr. McMahon's head. I wouldn't allow it to happen. I looked at the wording very carefully to make sure we were clear about not saying he himself was a criminal. That's not what I got back at me, all right? What I got back at me was name calling. I'm called a sewage millionaire, right? Photoshopping me inside of a sewer, photoshopping me at a roulette table. Trust me, I'm too much of a cheapskate and I don't like the odds of roulette. You know, that's not what came back at me.
Well, let me stay with one of the issues that you've both brought up now. It seems to me, Mr. McMahon, that I'm not sure if I've ever seen a package of tax and other incentives approved so quickly as they were for the roughly $70 million that's now been put on the table for whomever's going to build that big warehouse up on Morgan Road in Clay. Are you confident that this package is a good one and the breaks are appropriate?
It's a great project. It's a game-changing project. It's the largest project our community's had in a generation. And from the timing of how they've been approved, with the exception of one special meeting, it goes through the same process. And what's driving the timing of this is the company that wants to sign the lease. And the private sector drives the timing on these projects when you're competing for a regional location with other communities. And that's what we are. We're in competition. And so the OSIDA board has worked very timely. The town of Clay is still in the process of doing their diligence. But this is a game-changing project for our region, a $350 million logistics and distribution center, $40 million of new payroll, which will drive hundreds and hundreds of spin-off jobs, over 1,000 jobs being created in an area that is very important. We've been trying to get this type of logistics opportunity for a long time. It was part of our project, our plans for an inland port that haven't happened with the state, but these types of jobs are very necessary. We have over 60,000 people making under $25,000 a year, many of them not working. This is a career and direct pathway out of poverty.
Thank you. Mr. Malavenda, same project, same question.
Yeah, so since I started this campaign, I have been arguing that one of our greatest assets is our location, that we are located at the crossroads of something like, I don't want to throw a number out there because someone will fact check it and I'll be off by 3%, but a very significant portion of the population of the entire North American continent, from Montreal to DC, from Cleveland to Boston, and all cities and points in between. So our location for a transfer station like this is actually ideal. And I am very happy that we are getting 1,000 jobs, right? I think what causes me pause is purely the lack of transparency in this. The rush in the middle of a campaign season, right? I mean, the town of Clay just passed this, approved the zoning, like 6 days before Election Day.
They actually haven't.
And not the board, but the zoning board did. So, you know, what I don't know and what is curious to me is sort of what was the process like? Why is it there? Right?
Do you think it was rushed?
I think, of course, it's rushed.
Well, you're good. You're okay.
And
the timing, I'm clear with where you stand.
Yes, okay.
It's a good project, but not enough transparency.
Dan, the transparency argument doesn't hold south. This Syracuse.com endorsed me today talking about how my administration's been more transparent than previous administrations. The reality is the schedule for this project is if you want the project, you have to meet the schedule or else they're going somewhere else. And transparency, we've been working with so many partners on this to get this done and get this once in a generation opportunity for our community. So the private sector company is telling us if we can't have this built here by X, then we're going somewhere else.
It does put the developer in the driver's seat, obviously.
It does, but that's the marketplace when you're competing nationally for projects, which our region hasn't done in a while, and that's part of our comeback story. On
to infrastructure, and primarily sewage, because I know that Mr. McMahon has made that a priority, and so have you, and that's your background, Mr. Malavenda. Do you have a 60-second plan for making sure that we can keep our sewer infrastructure and upgrade it to the way it should be?
There is no 60-second plan. You can't do that in 60 seconds. And what the issue with it's really a commitment issue. and it's sort of a know-how issue. I mean, for me, this has been, my adult life has been in infrastructure, primarily sewers, but also wastewater treatment and water systems, but mostly sewers, and sanitary sewers. The issues that we face today, we faced in 1983 when I ran as a young man, literally 1983, we're talking the Soviet Union, when I ran as a young man for county legislature, the only other time I ran for a political office in my life. And you know, the fact that things take so long to change is part of the reason that I was motivated to get in this race, because I've seen that throughout my life. And the situation that we're in with our infrastructure, I think, is pretty abysmal and I think everyone knows it when they drive down the road in the wintertime. What they don't see is what's below ground.
All right, well, let's go below ground, Mr. McMahon.
Yeah.
On sewage, it may not be able to tell it in 60, but it's going to take years. But what are you doing about it?
Yeah, and so, Dan, we've talked about this before, and it's been well reported by Syracuse.com. We've put forward a plan. We went out and hired the professionals that are the experts in this field into our WEP team so that they could help implement this. And really the issue is our wastewater treatment facilities work quite well. But the infrastructure that connects the private business to the wastewater facilities is owned by smaller governments. And these governments don't have the wherewithal to really pay for this project. So what we're doing is we're doing a 20-year consolidation to correct the ownership of the infrastructure. Going in, slip lining many of these pipes using the latest technology. In some areas throughout the county, we'll have to make improvements to our wastewater sewage treatment. But this is what we're doing. We put forward a plan. That plan is now being implemented, and we're looking for partners ongoing to help fund the plan.
When it comes to issues, you've also put...
Can I respond to that?
Sure. 30 seconds, please.
All right. So, well, slip lining is like 40-year-old technology. I want to start with that. And the ownership, in my mind, is a question. I think that's a question for a town or a village, because these are assets in those towns. If they're going to give up ownership, typically, if they were to privatize, which is happening around the country, and I'm not necessarily in favor of it, but if they were, they get paid a fairly significant amount of money for that asset. And then it's only leased for 25 years. So if I was a village or town, a village mayor or a town supervisor, I would have an issue with that. And I do think that the way to get there is actually through IT, because even in sewer systems today, we're talking about sensors and technology. You need broadband across the whole county, but you need that data in order to inform your decisions. And that's a more important issue right now, or that's where you target and you do your maintenance in terms of a rifle rather than a shotgun that costs so much more.
You would take a different approach. Is that at variance with what you're already doing, Mr. McMahon?
Yeah, look at these pipes are failing. They are not assets. These private companies buy out wastewater systems. We have the wastewater treatment facilities. The pipes are leaking. They're collapsing. They're not worth anything. If the towns and the villages and the city thought they were worth something, they would fix them. They haven't fixed them. That's the real problem we have right now.
They haven't fixed them because they're, to some extent, because when the sales tax formula was changed, a lot of money was taken from the towns and the villages. They've lost their money. They've had to raise their tax base just to tread water, right? And the fact that they haven't been fixed is also indicative of leadership. I mean, leadership, and this isn't Mr. McMahon's problem. This is a historical problem that we've had here throughout my lifetime. We have never been willing to innovate. And if we innovate, and there are innovative technologies that we can bring to bear, I think we can go through a 20-year change. And when these companies privatize, part of that contract is their commitment to invest in that capital, make a capital investment. And if they don't make the capital investment, they lose their right for billing.
All right, we unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, we need to move on to the closing statements from these two candidates for countywide office. They seek your vote for Onondaga County Executive on Tuesday. First, 60-second closing statement from Democrat Tony Malavenda.
Look, I have run this race at the age of 63 because I'm committed to this county, to my home, for all of my lifetime. I want to release the assets that we have and to empower this county to move forward and be a modern county, just like I did, and not just me, my employees, my partner did with our company. We were innovative, and I want to bring the sense, what I've learned in management and infrastructure and how to handle people to county government. And I believe the way to free county government up to do that is to have a modern county government. We cannot attack the complicated problems that we've had forever, from concentrated poverty to failing infrastructure, unless we have a modern government that isn't gerrymandered, that isn't based on pay-to-play or cronyism. You want a true comeback story? This campaign is a comeback story. It's the first competitive campaign in my memory for this seat. You want a comeback story? 2 months ago, no one knew us. Right now, we are neck and neck, and we may win this thing. That's the comeback story.
Thank you, Mr. Malavenda. Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, Dan, first off, Tony, thank you for being here. These are important debates. And on behalf of my wife, Kate, and my children, Jack, Maddie, and Andrew, this last year serving as your county executive has been amazing and really the honor of a lifetime. When you look at what's going on in our community right now, we can't be distracted. We are putting together partnerships that we've never had before. Local governments are working together. We have an alignment of leadership with aligned intentions. And these efforts are being recognized not just by me or touting that. Today, Syracuse.com endorsed these efforts. They endorsed these collaborations. Our workforce that works for us, the CSEA, that knows me best as their county executive, has endorsed my campaign. Our building and trades unions, our Teamsters, our laborers have all endorsed us because they feel the momentum right now. And the momentum looks like this: 8,400 private sector jobs created over the last 12 months. New partnerships made. Companies like JMA moving into the south side of the city for a tech center. Looking at Bankers Health Group, moving into the Inner Harbor. Microsoft going to have a bricks and mortar location in Syracuse, New York. This is our story. This is a comeback story. I ask you to join me in this next chapter of our comeback story, and I ask for your vote on November 5th.
Thank you very much, and thank you for watching, everybody. If you haven't voted yet, and again, for the first time in the history of New York State, we've had a chance to cast a ballot before Election Day and early voting, but I know most of you probably haven't. And so if you are registered, it's your duty for this democracy to get out on Tuesday and vote at the polling place that you can find at ongov.net. I do also invite you, because we started the program talking for several minutes about the advertising in this campaign, and I want to give credit to Syracuse.com and the Syracuse newspapers, the Post-Standard, for doing some fact-checking, because if you look at it, you'll see that some of the ads on both sides of this campaign have not been entirely truthful or verifiable. So you make the judgment. Check it out and make sure, whatever else you do, you vote on Tuesday. See you soon on News Channel 9.